Ahoy there, YouTube! We're back again for more of our Essen Bonanza Explosion blog coverage brought to you by our amazing Kickstarter backers and our amazing sponsors. Be sure to show them some love in those clickables down below. Right now, we are about to learn about the new game Village of Horror, and we got Phillip here to teach us about it. Hey Phillip, how's it going?
Hi there, I'm doing fine, thank you very much. I'm here working for Taiwan Board Game Design, and I'm going to present Village of Horror to you now. So it's a social deduction game in which there are three factions. One is the Werewolf Faction, represented by werewolves and their cultists. One is the Villager Faction, represented by villagers, hunters and other common folk. And the third one is the Neutral Faction, the cards with the black border. Alright, players will belong to one of these factions, but which faction they belong to might change during the course of the game. But I'll try and start with the end of the game. In the end of the game, the winning faction will be determined by the number of cards, the number of cards in the graveyard. The faction with the lowest number of cards, or rather the lowest number of graveyard symbols in the graveyard, will win the game. Okay? So the idea is basically you try to kill cards from the other faction.
Okay.
How does that work? There's basically cards, that look at other cards, so cards that the other players played, or destroy them, put them into the graveyard. The graveyard is common to all the cards in the graveyard will be face down, so you need to kind of keep track of which cards have been killed so far. What can you actually do on your turn? There are three actions you can perform, one of three. One is to play a card face down. The reason why you would do that, because it doesn't do anything else, then you can't trigger the card's ability if you play it face down, is because the first card you play, so the first card in what you call your tableau, the cards in front of you, determines which faction you belong to. And you wouldn't want the other players to know which faction you belong to, at least not right away, because otherwise they will try and make it hard for you to win the game, of course. So that's why you would want to play a card face down. The other option, of course, is to play a card face up and then trigger the action that it allows. Say you play a werewolf card face up. The werewolf card allows you to look at a face down card of another player, and in case that card is not a werewolf or does not belong to the werewolf faction, put it into the graveyard. So that's one way of making the werewolf faction win. The hunter, who works for the villager faction, is pretty much the same, only that he can only kill werewolves and the alpha werewolf, not the cultists, which are also part of the werewolf faction. Okay, I'm not going to go into all the cards in detail because they would take too long. You can play the game with 2 to 5 players, and the number of cards in play depends on the number of players. Usually from 3 to 5 players, there will be 5 cards in the deck per player. So the cards also have numbers on them indicating at what player number they are supposed to be played. So this is one for 5 players only. So the ratio between the different factions is always similar. Yeah?
And about how long does the game last?
Probably shorter than my explanation at this point, probably. The game plays pretty quickly. It also depends on the number of players, but I'd say maybe 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay.
Not very long. I think there's two more things that I need to explain. One thing is the third action you can take on your turn, which is play a card face up, and to support it, play face down cards. Because if you play, say, one face down card with the werewolf, you're allowed to trigger the werewolf action twice. Once because you played the werewolf face up, and once because there's another face down card. So potentially you could play all your cards face down with one card face up to trigger that action several times. But in practice that usually doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because it leaves you at the mercy of your opponents. Because once you played all your cards, you can't do anything more anymore. Except for the last thing you can do when all cards have been played. Then a village mob action can be triggered, which represents the villagers going out as a mob because they notice something's wrong in their village and try and kill off the source of, that wrongness. So basically try and find out who is the werewolf, kill them. So if at the end of the game you have at least 2 villagers lying in front of you, you can call a village mob action and kill one of the other face down cards lying in your opponent's tableaus. So it's kind of a random action unless you actually know which card is lying there. Otherwise you can just shift the balance, turn the tides in the graveyard before you then go on with scoring. I think that is about it. I hope it gave you a quick overview that,
Thank you very much. That is Village of Horror. If it looks like it might be your cup of tea, be sure to check that one out. If you're enjoying this Essen coverage, please be sure to slap that subscribe button down below. As always, thanks for your time, YouTube.